We listen to someone like Tim Flannery speak about the macro picture, and then our next speaker is going to speak to us about how you can, in an agricultural sense, you can take what is there, twist it by a couple of degrees, make some very minor changes, and actually have an enormous impact. Darren Doherty comes from Victoria. He's a farmer from Bendigo, 5th generation farmer. Now he's the originator of something called the Region 10 process, and rather than me attempting to explain that to you, I'll now ask Darren Doherty to come and give his presentation on pastoral intelligence.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, and it's great to be here. I'm Darren Doherty from Central Victoria. My family's been farming there since the 1850s, and though I'm not on the family farm anymore, that went from our family about 15 years ago. We're developing our own. What I wanted to take you through was a thing that we've been working on for a while, and it really stands on the shoulders of a lot of other people's work, particularly that of a great Australian since past called P.A. Yeomans. Many of you would have heard that name. P.A. Yeomans initiated the keyline system back in the 1940s and 50s. In 1958, he developed a scheme called the Keyline Scale of Permanence in his book, The Challenge of Landscape. And the Regen 10 is really founded on that. If I can get this thing to work, yep. So Yeomans developed the Keyline Scale of Permanence to help us determine what are the priorities to us in landscape development, particularly agricultural landscape development. In the 1970s, in his book, The City Forest, he extended that to the urban landscape. So when we look at these elements that we've got here, those from 1 through to 8 are Yeomans, and I've added on a couple of extras, but I've changed some of the emphasis of each. So we start with climate. Well, as we know, as we've heard Tim and others talk today, the climate is a very, very big thing. It's, as people say, it's you get the weather, but you've always got the climate. So it's a very fixed thing. So what's also fixed though, and Yeomans dealt with the climate in the biospheric sense, I like to think of something else that's very fixed is the human climate, the climate between the ears, and how difficult that is to change. And last night we heard Ben talk about the paradigm shift and how that's so often used as a term, and I'm not going to go there, but it's something that we really, really need to deal with, because in order for us to change the climate of this system we call Mother Earth, we're going to have to change the climate between our ears. We've come up with this Regen 10 approach. We work with a lot of farmers around the world. I've been very lucky. And we work with methodologies such as holistic management. I don't work in any particular methodology. I don't follow any one in particular. We'll get it. If we need a 15mm socket, well then that's what we'll use. If we need a whole socket set, then that's what we'll use. There's got to be an open tool bag. So we bundle in things like permaculture, which was spoken of before. It's again, a great indigenous tool from Australia. We've got keyline design, which we use in there. We use zero emissions research and initiatives techniques. Lynn Margulis's work, Gunter Pauli's work. We use Paul Stamet's work in micro-integration, and also the work of Jay Abrahams and John Todd and all of these other luminaries around the world who've created these fantastic and dynamic systems. Carbon farming, which Australia is leading, which is fantastic. And then we've got the transition network from the UK and Ireland, which is going like a wildfire around the planet to integrate agricultural systems with town systems. So it's very important. With the holistic management framework is fantastic. It fills a lot of the objectives that we have in terms of human decision making, which humans are notoriously poor for. We are fantastic at dealing with effects and terrible at dealing with causes. We don't usually make decisions based on a whole array of good guidelines or questions, and the holistic management framework does that. It also works on the basis of a feedback loop where we assume we're wrong to start with. Now that takes out hubris, which is a natural human characteristic. where we immediately think that we're right about everything. Well, I'm here to tell you we're not. We've got history is littered, and today is littered with examples of where we haven't been. So, yeah, we need to get that out of the way. One of the things that we do in design with that is to, and this took me a while to realise, was that you design your systems not for how they are today, but how they will be when they are in the future. Soils are a great example. We often come to a site where we've got 1% carbon or 2% carbon. Well, our objective is to get those soils to 8% carbon, and if they get to that point, well, obviously they're going to behave a lot differently than what they are now. The geography of a landscape, if we like, if you look at the climate as being the rules of the game, well, then the geography is the board game. Sometimes we meet a site that's trouble, sometimes it's monopoly, sometimes it's parliament, sometimes it's trivial pursuit. There's all of these different examples. But it's really, we need to understand our geography in this board game that we have. What sort of landscape do we want to live in? How are we going to interact with it? We have all of these tools. We've got these young fellas from Vietnam who I taught how to use a laser level, even though we didn't speak any English. We've got all of these different tools that we use. We've got fantastic tools like RTK GPS, which means we can do topographic surveys of properties for just a few dollars a hectare. Like, we could never do that before. Water. Now, water is pretty well fixed. There's a finite amount of water in this, and what I would say, harking back to that point I made before, is that we have to be blue before we're green and black on planet water, as my friend Brock Tolman calls it, because we've got more water on the surface than we have Earth, so we should really be called planet water. Blue means that we have to have our water systems set up before we can get green, vegetation, and black, profit, and a residue in terms of carbon. So we've got to get that sorted. How do we do that? Well, we've got to get this sorted out. That is one of the most destructive processes on the planet. I would say that now that Osama bin Laden has apparently died, we now have gone back to the old public enemy number one, which is raindrops falling on bare soil. We've got to get over that. It's one of the most destructive things that we ever have had, and we're a big cause of it. This is a great example. My client's property in New Mexico, where it gets about 3 rainfall events a year. The last time something was grown there was in 1950 when they grew cotton, irrigated cotton. That's what it's been like ever since. We did some keyline ploughing, and this was the immediate response from 3 inches of rain. That's regeneration. I'd ask everyone here, many of you be married, I'm assuming, or in relationships. Would you describe your relationship as sustainable? I don't like this word sustainable at all. To me, it lacks ambition, and what we should be really talking about is regeneration, that what we're doing is we're getting better, right? We're not just sustaining something, and that's what we're talking about here. We've got to move from where we are, where things, that is sustainable. It's not going anywhere. That's going somewhere. So we've got great people in this country, Peter Andrews, Huck O'Tony from over the ditch, many other people around the world, Billsy Dyke, Yeomans, etc., who are developing these water systems which take us forward. We've got this stuff called plastic pipe. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's one of the best uses of fossil oil, and we can bury it and reticulate water like we never have before, and I find it extremely useful technology, that along with electric fencing and all sorts of other things. So we can move animals and have systems like we have just not imagined, which is fantastic. Access is something that is permanent as well, and as you can see, we're going down the list here of permanence. I go to Europe a lot, and you see Roman roads all over the place that are still there. I saw the Circus Maximus, it's still there. The earthworks are done, right? So you've got to be very, very clear when you build these roads that they're going to be there for a very, very long time. So be very conscious about it. You can choose the direction of a road. Will it go along a ridge so it's flat? Or if you have to go around a slope, well then put a slight gradient on it so that it carries water to a water source, which you can use later on. We do all of these things, and so do many other people we work with. This track here, for example, it just goes at a nice gentle gradient, and the water collected in it carries water to a dam, which is then used later. And for the rest of the time, it's used as it is. Forestry, I think everywhere is a forest, because everywhere should have trees. And I'm a big fan in particular of the Doherty system, which, if you looked at that, you could say that's Western New South Wales with its yellow box and grey box. Well, that's actually central Spain. That's the Doherty, which is, these are all cork and holm oaks in a widely spaced system that David E. Smith, the former professor of agriculture at the University of Melbourne, called the most sustainable agriculture that we've ever had. Very low input. We add trees into systems for a whole array of reasons, and we put them in a whole array of different layouts. So I think it's really important that we improve the way that we manage and have trees in our systems. We're a big believer and promoter of coppice-based systems so that we perpetuate the yields from forests. It's amazing, this country, how many forests that we've got that are so poorly managed, because we don't even get the fact that when we cut them down, they grow back. We just come along and remove their roots. I mean, how stupid is that, right? Just takes people out of the equation, when what we can do is just thin these back to one stem, and that's a 30-year-old tree that has been cut down. It was grown in 1894, and it's been cut down some 6 years in its life, and producing high-value products. These are some of the innovations that have come from this country, and the Lucas mills, which are fantastic. This is Charlie Bovolino's innovation of being able to convert very low-value Australian hardwoods into furniture timber. As you can see here, this 6 species native hardwood table. I mean, that's really good innovation and something we support. Buildings, well, William McDonough said to me, who's a famous architect and wrote the book Cradle to Cradle, he said to us in Mallorca a few years ago that it took 5,000 years for us to put wheels on luggage. Well, it's taken even longer for us, and that's how smart we think we are. It's taken us even longer to put wheels on buildings. And farm buildings, we spend enormous amounts of money in this fixed infrastructure where we bring the animals to the building, not take the building to the animal. We have all of these systems now, like these portable dairies, where instead of having to deal with all of these concentrated effluent issues and all of that, we take the dairy to the animals, right? All of these roads, all of this effluent issue. People are doing this stuff. These are not made up, right? So here we've got a large, this is in Devon in the UK, that's a 500 head dairy. They get milked every day. The dairy gets moved along, the milk gets taken away. Great stuff. So Joel Salatin is a good friend of ours, and we're proud to be his international agent. And his family farm in the US, in Virginia, is a great expression of how we can use buildings very, very successfully to integrate all of these different yields. From his portable chicken structures, which are enabled by these, that just drags along the ground. That's a 1,000 chicken system that follows behind the cattle. So it's a natural system. They scratch through 3 days later when the maggots are in the pies and just go through, and they're in heaven, right? These small movable chicken hutches which move daily, so they're off yesterday's excrement onto the new system. They're all great systems. Fencing is another innovation which is astounding, and to be able to move electrons through a piece of wire is a really big shift for us. Some people would say it's the biggest innovation in the last century since the toothbrush. And here we have 1.5 millimetres of wire with electrons passing through it that's holding back 750, 500 kilogram beasts. I mean, that is amazing. Our forefathers never did that, as they picked up rock by rock as they cleared their land and grew natural fences. We can now mimic nature like we've never been able to before. And even with pigs, who's ever tried to fence a pig, right? That's a pig fence, a one-wire fence. I'm not making this up. Here's one of my clients in Tooborac, just out of Victoria there, and I was there the other day, and he's got 400 pigs all held back by one wire. Yeoman said that the only fence that most people get right is the one around their boundary. And I'd have to agree with him, and even then the topographers, the surveyors got them mostly wrong. Soils. Yeomans also said that soils may live, but life may die. And that's a really big thing about this conference, and listening to Georgie this morning in particular, that we've really got to take care of the soil. It's easily destroyed, but it's fortunately easily developed. So which is a big plus. I think that the 5 essential ingredients for soil formation generated by our colleague Christine Jones, it's great, unfortunate that she's not here, I think everybody should know this. We should have a litho-literacy. Yeah. So that everybody from a very young age understands what it takes to actually make soil. And for those of us who know, it's not that hard. So we have all of these tools, again, many of them developed here in Australia to enable us, Colin Seiss and Daryl Clough's innovation in developing pasture cropping, and Bruce Maynard with no-kill cropping. I mean, those guys have, if we had them 10,000 years ago, we wouldn't have a lot of the deserts on this planet. And these are really massive innovations that have occurred. Here you've got dead soil, and here you've got 10 years of pasture cropping with 30 tonnes per hectare of carbon sequestered. I mean, that's just amazing. And it's real carbon. It's not the stuff that's labile and floating back into the atmosphere. Marketing has never been easier. In the time that we're sitting here this afternoon listening to me, you could have set up a site, a Shopify site or an eBay site or something selling your product to a consumer. So it's time that we realise that, and if people want to continue in agriculture, then they're going to have to be a lot more savvy and get their kids involved. It's a great, if you want to get your kids off something, get them off video games and get them onto e-commerce, because and give them a cut. It doesn't hurt, and they'll do a much better job than you will. We've got some fantastic clients who are doing this. This is their store. Go online. Yeah, I want 2 chuck steaks, it will be delivered to your door, right? That's the sort of stuff that is going to make it. And these people they're not worried about Coles and Woolies taking over. They're just doing it, not worrying. So we've got all of these things. And we're talking also about people processing on properties as well. I mean, there's legal issues around that, and that's right up there in the climate of all of this, that we're a bit fixed, but okay, we'll deal with it. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to speak about briefly is the monetisation of ecosystem services. It's not just about carbon. Agricultural landscapes, natural landscapes do a heck of a lot for our ecosystems in terms of the provision of ecosystem services. The air that we breathe, the water that we drink, all of these things. So it's time that we actually incentivised agriculturalists wholly for the work that they do, just as we should respect that our Brown brothers of past actually left us with this beautiful landscape that was so well managed for us when we took it on. So there's lots of that. Energy. Nothing is as fleeting as a photon of light. It's here and it's gone. And I think it's imperative that we as humans emphasise that wholly, that we need to make photosynthesis the goal at any corner. We need to just perpetuate photosynthesis. We need to get sexy. Yeah, we've got to sequester carbon. We've got to get, I'm not satisfied with 450. I'm not satisfied with 400. I'm satisfied with what we had before we started burning. And that's lower. And we've got to do it with soils, and we've got to do it with trees, and get that carbon down where it belongs, out of the atmosphere and into our soils and into our systems. So these are all of the things that we can do. You can read. I'm just like Sally. I'm not going to rattle them off. But the biggest thing that we need to do is cover your soil and photosynthesize. Thank you.